So one of the things I've been working on lately is how the Bible's chapter and verse numbers have meaning and additional context. And one of the things I was utterly blown away with is how musicians follow that same pattern. So what I decided to do is go ahead and break down a handful of songs. So there are three songs that I have completed on my website, but in my book Synapse, I go into several additional songs so you can kind of follow that pattern. And in the book, it gets into more of the actual meaning of what everybody's singing about. So on my website, I was just blown away. So I wanted to put something out there because I find it to be fascinating. And if it gives somebody hope that's sort of stuck in a spiritual prison, let's call it that, I wanted people to have hope. So the first song that I broke down is "Pray" by Jaden. So what I thought we could do is listen to the song, or at least parts of it, and analyze what Jaden's talking about, and then you can look at it relative to the actual Bible verses to see if that makes sense. Just follow that along. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and get started. So I stopped the song at the 52-second mark because that's when Jaden starts singing. So there are a few things that happen here. First off, the concept of being in a room without windows is a common thing. Think of like Noah in the ark. There were windows at the top, but there weren't windows further down. But the idea is like Ezekiel's temple or like Adam's rib is also a side room, also means side room. But the point is, like when Jesus said that there are going to be plenty of rooms in his Father's house, the point is there's plenty of room for everybody. So when Jaden's sitting there, well, laying down first off, and then sitting there, and then the lights spinning around, the idea is he's stuck in that room, and then he goes ahead and he starts crossing the bridge. And when he's crossing that bridge, he stops at the top, he uncovers his head, and he looks down at a reservoir that's effectively empty. There's hardly any water in it. And the point is he's on the bridge, he's crossing over from one side to the other. And by the end of the song, you'll see that he stops and he goes back. But the idea is he's kind of going through a daydream of sorts. So think of Adam being locked in a stupor while Eve is being created, or while Eve is going through life with the rib, which is the side room or the door of the ark fastened inside of her. So anyway, that's kind of what Jaden's portraying here. But specifically the 52-second mark, every number matters. So think of like Isaiah 52. That's when the first part of the story of the suffering servant is depicted, and then it goes into Isaiah 53. But at Mark 52, that's an important number. So think of that as like 5 plus 2 is 7 being a Sabbath. That might be a better way to look at it. But the other side of that is 2 and 5 being in opposition to one another. But the idea is that's when the journey starts. So I stopped it at the minute and 10 mark. So there are a few things that are going on here. One, he's still in his room, but it keeps flashing back to him being on a bridge. So think about that as being like a divided person, having one perspective outside the body and one perspective inside the body, or one perspective of reality and then the other perspective of being kind of locked in the box. And he says that his friends can't even tell if he's in hell. The only person that can tell if he's in hell is heaven. But the point is, he's sort of stuck in this position of being in two places at once. It's kind of like, think of like a ghost. That might be the best way to say it. You want to be who you are, but you can't. So I stopped at the minute 23 mark, and there are a few things that are going on here. First, he's dying. He wants to die in his sleep, right? And he lays down on the floor. He's not laying in the bed, but he's laying on the floor. So the big takeaway here is the idea of I think Romans 1:26, 127, where people are burning in desire for their other half, so to speak. It's like Adam and Eve being divided, and all they want is to be back together, but they can't. So anyway, that's kind of what's happening here. Okay, so I stopped at the minute 57 mark. So there's some really interesting things that are happening. So one is he wakes up to realize that maybe he can make it. He's no longer stuck in that room. He takes a shower, which is the idea of being cleansed. and then he looks in his eye like it's a window into his soul. That's kind of the idea. So then he wakes up, and then there's breakfast being served. So breakfast is really important. It's used throughout the Bible, but the idea is you're waking up in the morning. Okay, so he wakes up in the morning, and then he has this epiphany that he's going to make it. But notice it's also when his parents are told that he's dead. So it's like you have to die of one way to wake up in another way. So you're stuck in a prison, you're stuck locked up, but then you're carried forward. And that's kind of the idea of 1 Corinthians 15. It's like verses 46 to 48, I think, where you have to be carried by sort of an earthly body first, and then you're carried by a spiritual body, or carried spiritually, sort of thing. It's like being reborn, and being reborn into a new reality, a new understanding, a new awareness, so that you can experience and see kind of the way things are without you. It's kind of like seeing things from the outside. Anyway, that's the idea, and that's what Jaden's depicting in this particular scene. So I continued on, and I stopped it at the 2 minute and 30 mark. And the reason why I stopped there is specifically because the 2 minute and 30 mark is a big transition point, or any 30-second actually is a big transition point. So it's like a flip from one way to the other. It's like a cross. So notice his mom in the video is standing, appearing like a cross. But this is all after his funeral, after they experience and witness the death sort of thing, and then now the family splits. So that's kind of the idea of the father blaming the mother for causing this, and that kind of goes back to the Adam and Eve concept, where it would be easy for mankind to blame Eve, and I think the church today continues to blame Eve for the fall of man, but it's not really that. It's actually a misunderstanding or not understanding of how things work, and that's what's being depicted. But life continues on. We just have to grow in this sort of compartmentalized way, and coming together in this awareness of self. That's the idea of Jesus Christ's ministry, is to bring the mountains low and the valleys high. So the dead are raised up. That guy stuck in the room where he can't get out of a windowless room is able to come out and see what's going on. That's the next step of life. That's being reborn. That's a born again concept. I stopped at the 2 minute and 46 mark. Now the idea is to capture a couple of things. One is the shattering of the glass at 2:33, and that's the idea of being broken apart and broken into pieces. So you're sort of unrecognizable. And then Jaden, tries to put his hand on his mother's shoulder, and it's as though he's a ghost. She can't recognize that he's there. So then he ends up bolting out of the house. But that's the idea of that. So I stopped at the 3 minute and 16-second mark because of the importance of 3:16. Think of John 3:16, a very well-known Bible verse. But the point is, that's when somebody snaps awake to a new reality of being pronounced, aware, awake, and sort of fulfilled. Let's call it that. And the idea is to present sort of finality. But anyway, this particular song sort of tells a much deeper story, a much needed story, so that people can understand sort of the pain, and that not everybody is going through the same steps in life. Some people are going through a much more painful process of hell, and friends can't even tell. That's his whole point, and he ends it with a plea that people understand that they are important, they're needed, and they're wanted, and all that type of thing. So anyway, anybody going through this, God bless you. God wants you and does need you.